Pilot mocks teenager on airplane, shocked to learn he's a genius pilot in disguise. The sky was a canvas of brilliant blue as Flight 2187 prepared for departure from O'Hare International. Captain Richard Davenport strode through the terminal with the confidence of a man who had conquered gravity itself. 23 years in the cockpit had molded him into a legend at Transglobal Airlines, respected, feared, and notorious for his uncompromising standards. His crisp uniform, adorned with 4 golden stripes, commanded attention. At 52, his once jet-black hair had surrendered to distinguished silver at the temples, but his piercing blue eyes retained the sharpness that had guided him through countless storms. "Morning, Captain," First Officer Melissa Chen nodded as he entered the cockpit. At 36, Chen was one of the airline's most promising pilots, having climbed the ranks with remarkable efficiency despite the industry's persistent gender barriers. "Chen," Davenport acknowledged curtly, sliding into his seat and beginning his meticulous pre-flight routine. "Weather over the Atlantic. Clear for the first 4 hours, then we hit that system moving east from Newfoundland. Nothing we haven't handled before." Davenport grunted. In his mind, complacency was aviation's deadliest sin. Nothing we haven't handled before is precisely when things go wrong. The boarding process had begun, and Davenport observed the passengers filing in through the security cameras. Transglobal's flagship Boeing 787 Dreamliner would be carrying 256 souls to London today, and each one was his responsibility. He noticed a young man, no more than 17 or 18, being escorted to first class by a flight attendant. The boy's dark complexion and curly black hair stood out among the typically older, predominantly white business travelers in the premium section. "Probably some tech millionaire's kid," Davenport muttered. Chen glanced at the monitor. "Looks like he's traveling alone. Your generation handed everything on a silver platter." The cockpit door opened as Sandra Wilkins, the chief flight attendant, poked her head in. "Pre-flight checks complete in the cabin, Captain. We're ready when you are." "Thank you, Wilkins. Tell the ground crew I want to push back 5 minutes early. Headwinds are stronger than forecast." As Wilkins departed, Davenport noticed the young man from first class approaching the galley, apparently asking the flight attendant something. The boy pointed toward the cockpit. Davenport scowled. "Looks like we have an aviation enthusiast," Chen remarked. "Remember when that was us? When I was his age, I was cleaning hangars and studying manuals until my eyes bled. I wasn't flying first class across the Atlantic." Davenport adjusted his headset with irritation. The intercom buzzed. "Captain, we have a young passenger who's quite interested in aviation. He's asked if he could briefly see the cockpit before takeoff. He says he's considering flight school." Davenport's jaw tightened. FAA regulations had long since ended the tradition of cockpit visits during flights, but some captains still allowed quick pre-departure peeks to inspire the next generation. Davenport was rarely one of them. "We're in the middle of pre-flight," he responded curtly. Chen gave him a look. "We're ahead of schedule, Captain. Might take 30 seconds. After a moment of tense silence, Davenport sighed. "Fine, 30 seconds. The door opened, and the teenager entered, his eyes widening at the complex array of instruments. "Wow, thank you so much, Captain. This is amazing." Davenport noted the slight accent, perhaps Middle Eastern or North African, and the boy's nervous energy. "You have 29 seconds. I just wanted to say it's an honor to be on your flight. I've read about your emergency landing in Denver during that hailstorm 3 years ago. Textbook recovery from compressor stall." Davenport raised an eyebrow, surprised the kid knew about that incident. "I'm Tariq, by the way, Tariq Nassar." "Fascinating," Davenport replied dryly. "Time's up." The boy pointed to one of the displays. "Sir, is that an anomaly in the hydraulic pressure indicator for System B?" Davenport glanced at the gauge, perfectly normal. "That's the standard operating pressure, kid. Maybe finish high school before trying to lecture pilots." Tariq's face fell, but he maintained his composure. "Of course, my mistake. Thank you for your time." He turned to leave, then added, "The 787's triple redundant hydraulic systems are brilliant engineering. Sorry to have bothered you." After the door closed, Chen gave Davenport a disapproving look. That was unnecessary. What? Kids watch a few YouTube videos and think they're ready for the left seat. He probably couldn't tell a yoke from a joystick. Davenport returned to his checklist, brushing off the encounter. Neither pilot noticed Tarek's lingering gaze through the small window in the cockpit door, nor the calculated assessment in his eyes as he returned to his seat. The Atlantic crossing was smooth for the first 2 hours. Davenport had just returned from a brief restroom break when the trouble began. A warning light illuminated on the center console. "Electrical bus fluctuation," Chen reported, her fingers already dancing across the backup system's check panel. "Run the diagnostic," Davenport ordered, his irritation from earlier forgotten in the focus of the moment. The system stabilized, but 30 minutes later, another warning appeared, this time for the environmental control system. "Cabin pressure variance," Davenport muttered. "Within limits, but I don't like coincidences." As they approached the weather system off Newfoundland, the true nature of their problem revealed itself. Multiple systems began showing minor anomalies, nothing catastrophic individually, but collectively painting a concerning picture. "Someone in maintenance is getting fired," Davenport growled, working through the troubleshooting procedures with practiced precision. The aircraft shuddered as they entered the first bands of turbulence. Rain pelted the windscreen as lightning illuminated the clouds around them. The radio crackled with updates from air traffic control about the deteriorating conditions. Chen looked up from her display. "Captain, I think we should consider diverting to Gander. These system fluctuations combined with this weather." "Not yet," Davenport interrupted. "This aircraft has triple redundancies for a reason. We're still well within safety parameters." The cabin intercom chimed. It was Sandra Wilkins. "Captain, one of our passengers is requesting to speak with you, says it's regarding the electrical system issues." "Bit busy at the moment, Wilkins," Davenport replied tersely. "He's quite insistent, sir. Says he's an aerospace engineer and believes he knows what might be happening." Davenport rolled his eyes. "Tell whoever it is that we have 2 qualified pilots handling the situation." "It's the young man who visited earlier, sir, Tarek." Davenport almost laughed. "You're telling me that teenager thinks he can diagnose aircraft systems mid-flight?" Chen interposed. "Maybe we should hear him out, Captain, if he has relevant information." "Absolutely not. Tell him to return to his seat and enjoy the in-flight entertainment like everyone else." The turbulence intensified, and another warning light flashed, this time indicating an issue with the autopilot system. Davenport disengaged it, taking manual control of the aircraft with practiced ease. "Declaring emergency?" Chen asked. Davenport considered their situation. The aircraft remained fully controllable, and they had multiple systems still functioning normally. "Not yet. Let's see if these issues stabilize once we're through this weather." What Davenport didn't know was that in first class, Tarek was rapidly typing notes on his tablet, occasionally glancing out the window at the wing where the subtle flickering of the position lights told him more than any cockpit warning could. Next to him, an older gentleman observed with curiosity. "Bit of rough air," the man commented conversationally, trying to mask his own nervousness. Tarek nodded absently, then seemed to make a decision. He unbuckled his seatbelt during a momentary lull in the turbulence and stood up. "Sir, please remain seated," a flight attendant called out. "The seatbelt sign is illuminated." "I need to speak with the captain," Tarek insisted. "It's important." Sandra Wilkins approached. "I've already relayed your message, young man. The captain has the situation under control." "He doesn't," Tarek said with such quiet certainty that Wilkins paused. "The intermittent electrical failures, the cabin pressure variance, the position light flickering. It's a cascading failure pattern consistent with a specific maintenance error on the 787's power distribution system." Wilkins stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've seen it before," Tarek replied, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering confidence. "And if I'm right, the captain has about 15 minutes before he loses primary and secondary electrical systems." In the cockpit, the situation was deteriorating exactly as Tarek had predicted. The radio crackled with static as they struggled to maintain clear communication with air traffic control. Transglobal 2187, we're showing you deviating from your assigned heading, came the controller's voice through the static. Correcting now, Davenport responded, making the adjustment. We're experiencing some electrical anomalies, keeping you advised. Chen looked concerned. Captain, these issues are escalating faster than... Her words were cut short as several displays flickered, then went dark. The primary flight display recovered after a moment, but multiple secondary systems remained offline. Running on backup power for those systems, Davenport noted grimly. Time to divert. Contact Gander and tell them we're coming in. As Chen began the radio procedures for the diversion, the cockpit door chimed with the emergency override code, a sign that a crew member needed immediate entry. Davenport hit the release and Sandra Wilkins burst in, her usual composure visibly shaken. Captain, I wouldn't interrupt if it wasn't important, but that young passenger, he predicted exactly what's happening now. He says it's going to get worse, and he knows how to prevent it. Davenport didn't take his eyes off the instruments. This isn't a democracy, Wilkins. Return to your station. Sir, she persisted. He says if you don't reset the power distribution modules in sequence while temporarily transferring load to the APU, you'll lose all electrical systems within minutes. He seemed to know exactly what he was talking about. Chen looked at Davenport. That's actually a valid procedure for certain electrical faults in the 787. And what does a teenage boy know about 787 electrical systems? Davenport snapped, though a seed of doubt had been planted. Another system failed, this one controlling part of the hydraulics. The aircraft remained flyable, but their margin of safety was eroding. Captain, Chen said quietly, at this point, I don't think we have anything to lose by hearing him out. Davenport's knuckles whitened on the control column as he weighed his pride against the safety of his passengers. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Bring him in. Wilkins disappeared, returning moments later with Tarek, who moved into the cockpit with surprising poise given the circumstances. His eyes quickly scanned the instrument panels, noting the dark displays. Thank you, Captain, he said. We need to act quickly, may I? He gestured toward the electrical system panel. You can advise, Davenport said firmly. I'll execute. Tarek nodded. Fair enough. First, we need to isolate the affected systems by pulling circuit breakers Echo 7 through Echo 12, then reset the power distribution modules in sequence while temporarily transferring load to the APU, Davenport finished, already reaching for the breakers. Wilkins mentioned your theory. Tarek observed carefully as Davenport executed each step. Now wait 3 seconds before resetting the main bus. Perfect. To Davenport's astonishment, the systems began recovering one by one. The displays flickered back to life, and the warning indicators cleared. How did you know? Chen asked, her voice filled with both relief and curiosity. There was a service bulletin issued about this exact fault pattern 3 months ago, Tarek explained. A manufacturing defect in a specific batch of power distribution modules. When exposed to certain conditions, like the electrical field fluctuations in a storm, they can enter a recursive failure loop. Davenport's eyes narrowed. Service bulletins are internal documents. How would you have access to that? Tarek hesitated. I should probably explain who I am. The moment was interrupted by air traffic control. Transglobal 2187, do you still require diversion to Gander? Davenport checked his instruments. All systems were functioning normally now. Stand by, Gander, he turned to Chen. Run a full diagnostic. After a tense minute, Chen nodded. All systems nominal, Captain. Whatever he did, it worked. Davenport keyed his mic. Gander Control, Transglobal 2187. Systems have stabilized. We are canceling the diversion request and proceeding on our original flight plan to London Heathrow. Understood, Transglobal 2187. Safe travels. With the immediate crisis resolved, Davenport turned his full attention to Tarek. All right, young man, I think you owe us an explanation. Tarek took a deep breath. My name is Tarek Nassar. I'm not just an aviation enthusiast. I'm a certified commercial pilot with a type rating on the 787. I'm also part of Boeing's advanced engineering program. Chen's jaw dropped. But you're so young. I'm 19, Tarek said. I've been flying since I was 12, started on simulators, then real aircraft. I was recruited into a special accelerated program for exceptionally talented youth 3 years ago. That's impossible, Davenport scoffed. The regulations were modified for the program, Tarek finished. It's not widely publicized. We identify young people with extraordinary aptitude and create custom pathways. The FAA granted special exceptions for the program participants. Why are you on this flight as a passenger? Chen asked. I'm being sent to London to join the test pilot program for the next generation of commercial aircraft. I'm not supposed to draw attention to myself. The program prefers to operate quietly to avoid media scrutiny. That's why I didn't immediately identify myself. Davenport was still processing this information. So when you came to the cockpit earlier, I was genuinely excited to meet you, Captain Davenport. Your reputation is legendary among pilots. I wouldn't normally have said anything, but when I noticed the first signs of the electrical issue, I had to try. The cockpit fell silent except for the steady hum of the engines. Davenport's mind raced, reconstructing their earlier interaction through this new lens. He had dismissed and mocked someone who was, apparently, a certified pilot with specialized knowledge that had just saved his aircraft. I owe you an apology, Davenport finally said, the words coming with difficulty. And my gratitude. Tarek shook his head. No apology necessary, Captain. You were following protocols. I would have been skeptical, too. I wasn't skeptical, Davenport admitted. I was dismissive. There's a difference. Chen studied Tarek with newfound respect. Would you mind staying in the cockpit for a while? I'd love to hear more about this program. Davenport nodded his agreement, as would I. For the next hour, as the Dreamliner cruised above the Atlantic, Tarek shared stories of the accelerated program and his journey from a child fascinated by flight to becoming one of the youngest commercial pilots in history. Davenport found himself impressed not just by the young man's knowledge, but by his humility and passion. What made you want to fly? Davenport asked during a lull in the conversation. Tarek's expression turned reflective. My father was a pilot for Royal Jordanian Airlines. He died in a training accident when I was 10. After that, flying became my connection to him. The personal revelation hung in the air, adding depth to their understanding of the young man. He would be proud, Chen said softly. Tarek smiled. I hope so. As the flight progressed, word had spread throughout the cabin about the young passenger who had helped the pilots. Passengers whispered and pointed, curiosity piqued by the unusual mid-flight drama. Sandra Wilkins had managed the situation admirably, neither confirming nor denying the rumors, but ensuring everyone remained calm. In first class, the older gentleman who had been seated next to Tarek was speaking with another flight attendant. Remarkable young man, he commented. Don't suppose you could tell me more about what happened up there? I'm sorry, sir, the attendant replied professionally. I don't have any details to share. The man smiled understandingly. Of course, I'm just glad whatever it was seems to be resolved. He glanced toward the cockpit. Quite the coincidence, him being on this particular flight. As the hour drew to a close, Davenport reluctantly suggested that Tarek should return to his seat. We'll be beginning our descent soon, and you should get some rest. It's been an eventful flight. Tarek stood, extending his hand. It's been an honor flying with you, Captain Davenport. Davenport shook it firmly. The honor is mine. He hesitated, then added, when we land, I'd like to introduce you to some colleagues at Heathrow, people who might be interested in your perspective on pilot training programs. I'd like that, Tarek replied. Thank you. As he turned to leave, Chen called after him. Safe travels, Tarek. Maybe we'll fly together someday, properly, I mean. Tarek grinned. I'd like that too. After he left, Davenport and Chen exchanged looks. Not what I expected when I woke up this morning, Davenport admitted. Life has a way of humbling us just when we need it, Chen replied. If you're enjoying this incredible journey through the skies, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps this channel soar to new heights, just like our young pilot Tarek. As Flight 2187 began its descent into London Heathrow, the gentle curve of the earth gave way to the patchwork landscape of the English countryside. Davenport handled the controls with practiced precision, though his mind occasionally drifted to the young man in first class who had shown him that expertise could come in unexpected packages. What Davenport didn't know was that his interaction with Tarek was about to become much more complicated. For in the terminal at Heathrow, waiting with stern expressions and official credentials, were two men from British Aviation Security. The landing was smooth, and as the aircraft taxied to the gate, Davenport completed his shutdown procedures with the same meticulous attention to detail that had defined his career. He and Chen would file a detailed incident report about the electrical anomalies and the unconventional resolution, though Davenport was still uncertain how much of Tarek's story to include. After parking at the gate and completing the final checklist, Davenport stood and stretched. "Remarkable flight," he commented to Chen. "One for the logbooks," she agreed. "Are you really going to introduce him to your contacts?" "Absolutely. That young man has a bright future ahead of him." As passengers began to deplane, Davenport stepped out of the cockpit to personally thank Tarek and exchange contact information. But when he reached first class, the young man's seat was empty. "He was one of the first to deplane," Sandra Wilkins explained. "Seemed in quite a hurry." Davenport frowned. "Did he say anything?" "Just thanked me for the flight and left. Is something wrong?" "No," Davenport replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "No, I'm sure everything's fine." But as he exited the aircraft into the jetway, Davenport was met by the stern-faced security officials he'd glimpsed earlier. "Captain Davenport?" one asked, displaying credentials from the Civil Aviation Authority. "We need to speak with you regarding an incident on your flight." "The electrical issue?" Davenport asked. "I was planning to file a full report." "Not the electrical issue, Captain. We need to discuss one of your passengers, a young man named Tarek Nassar." A cold feeling settled in Davenport's stomach. "What about him?" The security officer glanced around. "Not here, please come with us." In a private room near the Airport Operations Center, Davenport sat across from the two officials, identified as James Norton from the CAA and Michael Everett from British Intelligence. "Captain," Norton began, "we understand that during your flight you allowed a passenger named Tarek Nassar into the cockpit and that he performed some kind of procedure on the aircraft systems. Is that correct?" Davenport maintained his composure. He advised on a resolution to an electrical system issue. "I executed the procedure myself, and it resolved the problem." "And you allowed this because?" "Because we had cascading electrical failures during turbulent conditions, and he demonstrated specific knowledge about the issue. It was a judgment call that prioritized the safety of the aircraft and passengers." Everett leaned forward. "Captain Davenport, are you aware of who Tarek Nassar actually is?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. "He told me he's part of an accelerated program for gifted young pilots, that he has a commercial license and 787 type rating." The two men exchanged glances. "That's partially true," Norton said carefully. "Tarek Nassar is indeed remarkably gifted, but his story about being in a Boeing program is fiction." "Then who is he?" Davenport demanded, a sense of unease growing. Everett opened a folder and pushed a document across the table. "Tarek Nassar, 19 years old, Jordanian national, former child prodigy in mathematics and engineering, and for the past 14 months, a person of significant interest to multiple intelligence agencies." Davenport scanned the document, his confusion mounting. Why would intelligence agencies be interested in a teenage pilot? "Because he's not just a pilot," Everett explained. "Nassar has been involved in developing advanced aviation systems with potential military applications. 6 months ago, he disappeared from a research facility in Dubai. This is the first confirmed sighting of him since then." Davenport sat back, stunned. "Are you saying he's some kind of spy?" "We're saying his situation is complicated," Norton replied carefully. His knowledge is considered sensitive by several governments. We believe he may be attempting to defect with valuable intellectual property. To whom? That's what we're trying to determine, Everett said. Did he mention where he was going in London? Any contacts, plans? Davenport shook his head, still processing this revelation. He said he was joining a test pilot program, nothing specific. A thought occurred to him. But he must have gone through customs by now. Surely you can. He never presented himself to border control, Norton interrupted. We've been monitoring all exits. He's vanished. The implication was clear. Somehow, Tarek had managed to slip away despite the airport's security protocols. Davenport thought back to the young man's confidence in the cockpit, his intimate knowledge of aircraft systems. Perhaps evading airport security would be trivial for someone with his capabilities. Captain, Everett continued, we need to know exactly what he did to your aircraft. Could he have installed something, a device, software? The suggestion sent a chill through Davenport. Absolutely not. He never touched the controls or systems directly. I performed all actions under his guidance, and the aircraft performed flawlessly afterward. Nevertheless, your aircraft will need to be thoroughly inspected before its next flight. Davenport bristled at the implication. You think I would compromise my aircraft, my passengers? We think you were manipulated by someone extremely intelligent with unknown motives, Norton replied, just as he apparently manipulated his way through airport security. As the questioning continued, Davenport found himself reevaluating every moment of his interaction with Tarek. Had the electrical issues been genuine or somehow manufactured to give Tarek access to the cockpit? Had Davenport been an unwitting pawn in some larger game of international intrigue? What troubled him most was that despite these new revelations, he couldn't bring himself to believe Tarek had malicious intent. The young man had shown genuine passion for aviation and had seemingly resolved a dangerous situation. But if his story about Boeing wasn't true, what else had he lied about? After 2 hours of exhaustive questioning, Davenport was finally released with instructions to remain available for further interviews. As he walked through the terminal toward the crew hotel, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I'm sorry for the deception, Captain. The program isn't Boeing's, it's more complicated than that. What I told you about my father was true. What I did for your aircraft was necessary. Some truths must remain hidden even from those who deserve them. Fly safe. Davenport stared at the message, a mixture of anger, confusion, and reluctant admiration swirling within him. Before he could decide whether to report the contact to the authorities, the message disappeared from his screen, leaving no trace in his message history. Meanwhile, in a modest flat in East London, Dr. Alina Reynolds closed her laptop with a satisfied smile. The former aerospace engineer had been monitoring Flight 2187 systems remotely, tracking the entire incident through backdoor access she'd helped design years before. Across from her, Tarek sat with a cup of tea, his disguise, now including glasses and significantly lighter hair, transforming his appearance. Well done, she said. The beacon is active and transmitting. We have complete telemetry from the aircraft systems. Your father would be proud. This doesn't bring him back, Tarek replied quietly, but it might prevent others from suffering the same fate. Alina nodded sympathetically. Transglobal's maintenance protocols killed your father, and they've been covering it up for years. But now we have proof they're still cutting corners, proof that came from their own systems, documented in real time during an actual flight incident. Captain Davenport is a good pilot, Tarek said. He doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. Sometimes good people get caught in the crossfire when pursuing justice, Alina replied. But he'll be fine once the truth comes out. The question is, are you prepared for what comes next? Once we release this data to the aviation authorities, both our identities will be compromised. Tarek stared out the window at the London skyline. I've been living with secrets for too long. It's time for the truth, about my father's death, about Transglobal's negligence, all of it. And the program, your former colleagues won't simply let you walk away. One battle at a time, Tarek replied. First, we expose Transglobal, then we deal with the program. As night fell over London, Richard Davenport lay awake in his hotel room, replaying the day's events. In his 30 years of flying, he'd never experienced anything like it. His thoughts kept returning to Tarek, the intelligence in those young eyes, the confidence beyond his years. Davenport had misjudged him initially, seeing only his age and ethnicity, not his capabilities. That error in judgment now haunted him, both professionally and personally. His phone buzzed again, the airline's scheduling department. His return flight had been assigned to another crew while the investigation continued. He was being called back to Chicago for further debriefing. Whatever game Tarek was playing, Davenport was now irrevocably part of it. As he finally drifted toward sleep, Davenport couldn't shake the feeling that the real story was still unfolding, that the truth was circling somewhere above them all, like an aircraft waiting for clearance to land. The next morning, First Officer Melissa Chen was enjoying a rare coffee in the crew lounge at Heathrow when her tablet chimed with a news alert. The headline made her coffee cup freeze halfway to her lips. Trans-Global Airlines under investigation after whistleblower reveals systematic maintenance violations. The article detailed allegations that Trans-Global had been falsifying maintenance records for years, specifically regarding electrical system inspections on their 787 fleet. An anonymous source had provided documentation showing that the airline had been aware of potential issues with the power distribution modules, but had deferred required inspections to keep aircraft in service. Chen immediately tried calling Davenport, but her call went straight to voicemail. As she scrolled through the article, her blood ran cold when she reached the final paragraphs. Industry insiders speculate that the whistleblower may be connected to Trans-Global Flight 2187, which experienced electrical system anomalies over the Atlantic yesterday. The flight landed safely at Heathrow, but sources close to the investigation report unusual circumstances surrounding the incident. These allegations bear striking similarity to the case of Royal Jordanian Airlines Flight 909, which crashed during a training exercise 9 years ago, killing all 3 crew members. That accident was officially attributed to pilot error, but these new documents suggest a potential connection to the same electrical system issues now being reported at Trans-Global. Chen set down her tablet, her mind racing. Tarek had mentioned his father died in a training accident while flying for Royal Jordanian. The timing matched. The circumstances matched. Suddenly, the young man's interest in their flight took on an entirely different dimension. In Chicago, Trans-Global's corporate headquarters had erupted into crisis mode. CEO William Pearson barked orders at his executive team as they scrambled to contain the PR disaster unfolding across every major news outlet. "How the hell did this happen?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the conference table. "Who leaked these documents?" Marcus Webb, the airline's chief of maintenance operations, looked ashen. "The documents appear authentic, sir. Internal maintenance directives, inspection deferrals, even emails discussing cost-benefit analyses of compliance versus non-compliance with the service bulletins." "I don't care if they're authentic. I want to know who leaked them," Pearson shouted. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from board members, reporters, and regulatory officials. The airline's legal counsel, Sarah Jameson, spoke up. "Sir, we have a bigger problem. If these allegations are proven true, we're looking at criminal negligence charges, massive civil liability, and potentially having our operating certificate suspended." Pearson collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "Get Davenport back here immediately. If this is connected to his flight, I want him muzzled before he talks to the press." "Sir," his assistant interrupted, "there's something else you should see." She passed him a tablet displaying a video that was rapidly going viral on social media platforms. On the screen was Tarek Nassar, looking directly into the camera with unwavering determination. Behind him was a wall of technical diagrams and photographs. "My name is Tarek Nassar," he began. 9 years ago, my father, Captain Farid Nassar, died when his aircraft crashed during what should have been a routine training flight. The official investigation ruled it pilot error, destroying not only his life but his reputation and legacy. Tarek held up a stack of documents. These records prove that the crash was actually caused by the same electrical system defect that nearly brought down Trans-Global Flight 2187 yesterday. a defect that both the manufacturer and multiple airlines, including Transglobal, have been aware of for years. Pearson's face drained of color as Tarek continued. Yesterday, I witnessed firsthand how this defect manifests. I helped Captain Richard Davenport resolve the issue mid-flight, saving the lives of everyone on board. What Captain Davenport didn't know was that I had spent the last 9 years of my life preparing for that moment, studying aviation engineering, becoming a pilot myself, and infiltrating the systems that kept this deadly secret buried. Tarek's voice grew stronger. To the executives at Transglobal and other airlines who chose profit over safety, your time of accountability has come. To the regulatory agencies who failed in their oversight, the evidence is now in your hands. And to the families who, like mine, were told their loved ones died because of pilot error when the real culprit was corporate negligence, I hope this brings you some measure of peace. The video ended with Tarek holding up a photograph of his father in his pilot's uniform, standing proudly next to an aircraft. In the stunned silence that followed, Sarah Jameson was the first to speak. "Sir, we need to issue a statement immediately." Pearson didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the tablet screen where Tarek's final image still showed. "Who is this kid?" he whispered. "How did he get access to all this?" "Sir," Webb said tentatively, "there's something else you should know. After reviewing our records, it appears that Captain Farid Nassar was initially hired by Transglobal before transferring to Royal Jordanian. He worked here for 3 years. And during his time here, he filed several maintenance concerns about electrical systems on our previous fleet. Concerns that were not addressed adequately." Pearson's phone rang again. The FAA. As the walls began closing in around him, he realized that Tarek Nassar had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated acts of whistleblowing in aviation history. Back in London, Tarek and Alina watched the news reports flood in. Regulatory agencies in multiple countries had grounded the affected aircraft for inspection. Transglobal's stock was in freefall, and the investigation into Royal Jordanian Flight 909 had been officially reopened. "Phase 1 complete," Alina said, closing her laptop. "But they'll come for you now. The program won't allow such a public exposure." "Let them come," Tarek replied calmly. "I've accomplished what I set out to do. My father's name will be cleared." "And Captain Davenport, what about him?" Tarek smiled slightly. "He's a good pilot, he'll land on his feet." Across London, Richard Davenport sat in a secure room at the U.S. Embassy, explaining for the third time his interaction with Tarek Nassar. The FAA investigators, airline representatives, and intelligence officers had been grilling him for hours. "So you maintain that you had no prior knowledge of Mr. Nassar or his intentions?" one investigator asked skeptically. "As I've stated repeatedly, I had never met him before that flight," Davenport replied, his patience wearing thin. "And I would appreciate if someone would explain to me what the hell is actually going on." The senior FAA official sighed. "Captain Davenport, you've been caught in the middle of something much larger than a simple maintenance issue. Tarek Nassar has just exposed one of the biggest safety cover-ups in modern aviation history. And he used your flight, your aircraft, to do it. By fixing a genuine problem that could have resulted in a catastrophic accident," Davenport pointed out. "Whatever his motives, he saved 256 lives, including mine." "That's not in dispute," the official acknowledged. "But we need to understand if the situation on your aircraft was engineered in any way." Davenport considered the question. The timing was certainly suspicious. Of all the flights Tarek could have been on, he happened to be on one that experienced the exact issue he was trying to expose. Yet the danger had been real, the resolution legitimate. "I don't believe the situation was manufactured," Davenport finally said. "If you're asking if Tarek Nassar somehow sabotaged my aircraft to create an emergency he could then resolve, no. The fault patterns were consistent with genuine system failures, and his solution was by the book." The room fell silent as the investigators exchanged glances. One of them received a message on his phone and stepped out briefly, returning with a troubled expression. "Captain Davenport, we've just received word that Transglobal is attempting to place responsibility for the incident on you. suggesting you may have been complicit in Nassar's scheme. Davenport's expression hardened. That's absurd. Nevertheless, they're building a narrative that you breached protocols by allowing him into the cockpit, potentially compromising aircraft security. To save the damn plane, Davenport exploded, his composure finally cracking. If I hadn't let him in, we might all be dead. Does Transglobal prefer that outcome? The senior FAA official raised a calming hand. No one is endorsing their position, Captain. I'm simply making you aware of it. He paused. There is, however, another development you should know about. Melissa Chen has come forward with a recorded conversation from the cockpit, the entire interaction between you and Nassar. It corroborates your account completely. Relief washed over Davenport. Chen had activated the cockpit voice recorder's secondary function, a feature that few pilots utilized, but that could prove invaluable in situations exactly like this. So what happens now? Davenport asked. Now, the official said, you have a choice to make. Transglobal will likely offer you early retirement with a generous package in exchange for your silence. Or you can go public with your experience, supporting Nassar's claims about the safety issues, but potentially ending your career as a commercial pilot. Davenport didn't hesitate. I've spent my entire career putting safety first. I'm not about to stop now. As Davenport left the embassy, he found Melissa Chen waiting for him outside. Thought you could use a friendly face, she said. You saved my career with that recording, Davenport replied gratefully. Chen shook her head. You saved it yourself by making the right call in a crisis. I just provided the evidence. She hesitated. Have you seen the news? Transglobal's CEO just resigned. The board is cooperating fully with investigators now. Good, Davenport said firmly. It's about time. What will you do now? Chen asked as they walked toward the waiting car. Davenport considered the question. His neat, orderly career had been upended in the span of 24 hours. Yet strangely, he felt lighter than he had in years. I think it's time I stopped judging people by their appearance or age, he said. Tarek taught me that expertise can come in unexpected packages. He certainly did, Chen agreed. You know, there are rumors he's being recruited by multiple air forces and aerospace companies. Apparently his skills are in high demand. Davenport smiled. Somehow I doubt he'll be taking those offers. He seems to have his own path. As they drove through London, Davenport's phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. Terminal 3, coffee shop, 30 minutes. Come alone if you want the full story. Davenport stared at the message, weighing his options. This could be a trap or another complication in an already complex situation. But his curiosity and a growing respect for the young man who had outsmarted everyone won out. Can you drop me at Terminal 3? He asked Chen. There's something I need to do. The airport coffee shop was crowded with travelers, but Davenport spotted Tarek immediately. Or rather, he spotted the young man he assumed must be Tarek, though the hair color and glasses created an effective disguise. Sliding into the seat across from him, Davenport said simply, You've been busy. Tarek smiled slightly. Captain Davenport, thank you for coming. I think we're past formalities at this point. You can call me Richard. Richard, then? Tarek glanced around the bustling terminal. I wanted to apologize personally for involving you in this situation. It was never my intention to put your career at risk. But it was your intention to be on my flight, Davenport asked, already knowing the answer. Tarek nodded. I've been tracking the maintenance records of several airlines. Transglobal Flight 2187 had 3 of the suspect power distribution modules installed during its last heavy maintenance check. The probability of a failure during your flight path, crossing the weather system off Newfoundland, was higher than any other flight in the next month. So you booked yourself on my flight expecting an emergency. Hoping to prevent one, Tarek corrected. I didn't know if the issue would manifest, but if it did, I needed to be there. Davenport studied the young man across from him. Your father, that part was true. Pain flickered across Tarek's face. Every word. He was an excellent pilot. When his plane went down, everyone assumed he had made a terrible mistake. My mother never recovered from the dual trauma of losing him and seeing his reputation destroyed. She died 3 years later. I'm sorry, Davenport said softly. Truly. After she died, I dedicated my life to clearing his name. I knew the official explanation was wrong. My father would never have made such a basic error. So I taught myself everything I could about aviation, engineering, computer systems. I earned my pilot's license at 16 through a special program for gifted students. And then I began searching for the truth. And now you found it, Davenport observed. Exposed it to the world. With your help, Tarek acknowledged, though you didn't know it at the time. What about the intelligence agencies looking for you, the program they mentioned? Tarek's expression grew guarded. That's complicated. I was recruited by a classified research initiative developing new aviation systems. When I discovered their technology could help me prove what happened to my father, I borrowed it without permission. You stole classified technology, Davenport translated. I liberated tools that helped expose a deadly cover-up, Tarek countered. But yes, technically, I committed several serious crimes, which is why this will be our last conversation. He checked his watch. My transport leaves in 20 minutes. Where will you go? It's better if you don't know. Plausible deniability and all that. Davenport leaned forward. You could turn yourself in, you know. With what you've exposed, you'd likely be treated as a whistleblower, not a criminal. Tarek shook his head. Perhaps for the trans-global situation, but the program is another matter entirely. No, my path forward lies elsewhere. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small data card, sliding it across the table. This contains everything, all the evidence about trans-global, about my father's crash, about the maintenance cover-ups. Keep it somewhere safe. Why give this to me? Because despite our rocky start, I trust you to do the right thing with it, Tarek replied. And because I think you still have questions about your aircraft, about whether I may have done something to it beyond what you saw. Davenport had indeed been wrestling with that concern. Did you? No, Tarek said firmly. I would never endanger an aircraft or its passengers. The card contains the diagnostic data proving the fault was genuine. It should help clear both our names. Relief washed over Davenport. Thank you. Tarek stood, extending his hand. It's been an honor, Captain. Perhaps our paths will cross again someday under better circumstances. Davenport shook the offered hand, still marveling at how his perception of this young man had transformed in just 24 hours. I hope they do, and Tarek, your father would be proud. A genuine smile broke across Tarek's face, the first Davenport had seen. That means more than you know. With a final nod, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Davenport with the data card and a story few would believe. 1 week later, Richard Davenport stood before the NTSB board in Washington, D.C., testifying about Flight 2187 and the events that had led to the industry-wide investigation now underway. Melissa Chen sat in the gallery, along with dozens of reporters and aviation officials. In conclusion, Davenport said, I believe this incident highlights not only specific maintenance failures but a broader cultural issue within aviation where experience is sometimes valued over expertise, and where stereotypes about who looks like an authority can cloud critical judgment, including my own. The committee chairman nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Captain Davenport. Your candor is appreciated. Do you have any knowledge of Tarek Nassar's current whereabouts? None, Davenport replied truthfully. Though I believe his actions, while unorthodox, ultimately served the cause of aviation safety and justice. As the hearing concluded, Davenport was approached by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. Captain Davenport? James Harrington, Director of Flight Operations at Meridian Airlines. I wonder if I might have a word. Davenport recognized the name. Meridian was a growing international carrier with a reputation for cutting-edge safety practices. Of course. I'll be direct, Harrington said. Transglobal's loss could be our gain. We're impressed with how you handled both the in-flight emergency and its aftermath. Meridian is expanding our flight training division, focusing specifically on emergency procedures and decision-making under pressure. We could use someone with your experience and your newly demonstrated openness to unconventional thinking. The offer caught Davenport by surprise. After 23 years at Transglobal, he had assumed his career was effectively over. I'm intrigued, he admitted. We'd also be interested in speaking with your first officer, Ms. Chen. Her actions showed remarkable integrity. Davenport smiled. She's the best co-pilot I've ever worked with. You'd be lucky to have her. As they exchanged information, Davenport's thoughts drifted to Tarek. The young man's actions had triggered a cascade of changes across the industry. 3 airlines had already discovered and addressed the same electrical issue on their fleets. The manufacturer had issued a mandatory service bulletin, and the investigation into Captain Farid Nassar's crash had been reopened, with preliminary findings supporting Tarek's claims. One life lost had potentially saved countless others. One son's determination had rewritten his father's legacy, and one encounter had transformed Davenport's understanding of what it meant to be a true aviator. That night, as Davenport packed up his apartment in Chicago, preparing for a fresh start with Meridian in Atlanta, his computer chimed with an incoming email from an encrypted address. There was no message, only an attachment, a photograph of Tarek standing beside a sleek research aircraft in a desert setting, giving a thumbs up with a broad smile. In the background, partially visible, was a hangar with text in Arabic. Davenport smiled, saved the image to a secure drive, and then permanently deleted the email. Wherever Tarek was, whatever he was doing, Davenport had a feeling the young man was exactly where he needed to be, continuing to push the boundaries of aviation, just as his father would have wanted. As he closed his computer, Davenport reflected on how quickly judgment could cloud perception, and how dramatically perceptions could change when challenged. The sky, as pilots knew better than most, was never simply blue or gray, but a constantly shifting canvas of infinite possibilities, much like the people who dared to fly through it.